Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Kof Yod Aleph. Tenor Banan Hamed Lechavero Ses Sechor Poalim Shenehen En Obedin Mishum Bar Talim Ze Lefi Shelo Secharan Veze Lefi She'en Peulato Eslo. A Baraita teaches that if someone says to his friend, "Can you do me a favor and go hire some workers for me? I don't want to go down to the market where the day laborers are, so you go and hire them on my behalf." So he does so. They come and they work on the sender's land. And then if the sender does not pay the workers on time, neither of those two individuals violate the law of do not delay in paying the workers. Why? Well, one of them because he did not hire them. In other words, the boss, the owner of that field, he's not the one that actually hired them. So he doesn't violate. And the messenger who hired them is not actually their boss. They didn't work for him. And he's not even paying them. So he doesn't violate either. Okay, let's clarify this baraita. Hechidame. What exactly is the case? If the messenger said, come to work and I am responsible for your payment. If the messenger took upon himself that responsibility, then he would violate. Let's see the case. Tanya. If someone hires laborers and by mistake he shows the laborers the wrong field, he points to a field or gives an address of his own field, and by mistake he pointed the wrong direction, or they gave them the wrong coordinates, and they went and they worked on someone else's field. Now, the guy who hired them has to pay them because that was the deal. He hired them. It was his fault that he showed the workers the wrong place to go to work. So he has to pay in full. But then that guy who hired them can go to the owner of the field where the work was actually done and say, "Listen, you got benefit, so at least pay me the benefit." Even if that benefit is less than the amount that he paid to the workers, so the owner of the field doesn't have to pay the full amount of whatever the workers got, but he does have to pay for, this field was not weeded before, now it's weeded. How much is that worth to you? He's going to have to do that anyway, so since he benefited, he pays something. So we see from here is that there is a possible case where someone can hire people, and yet the workers will work for someone else. And in that case, since the guy who hired them also agreed that he's going to be responsible to pay them, so he has to pay them, and therefore certainly he has to pay them on time. So that can't be the case. Rather, it's talking about a case, which is I think what we understood to begin with, where the guy who hires the workers says, "Listen, come work, and that guy is going to pay you. Somebody sent me, he asked me to hire you on his behalf, and he's going to pay you." And then they go and work for that sender, for that owner of that field. And that's the case that this Baraita is talking about. The guy who hired them, physically told them, made the deal with them, doesn't have to pay them at all. So certainly he won't violate Bal Talin. And the owner of that field who sent this guy to hire also does not violate because he is not the one that made the deal with them in the first place. Yehuda bar Moremor amar le lishma'eh zil ager li po'alim ve'emar lehu sechelchem al bal habayit Moremor umor zutra agre lehadadeh. Now that we know this law, we see a few sages that actually used it to help make sure that they wouldn't violate Bal Talin. So Yudat Moremor would say to his attendant, "Go hire workers for me," and say that the owner of the field is going to pay you. And that way, just in case Yudat Moremor wouldn't pay them on time, he wouldn't violate the law. And in fact, they would hire workers for each other. See, Yudat and Moremor maybe just didn't want to go down to the market, but these two, they would both go down to the market, and yet, instead of hiring their own, the one, Moremor would hire workers, "Come work for Mozutra, he'll pay you," and Mozutra did the same thing. I assume that these were sages, and that they would pay their workers honestly, but just in case they delayed a little bit, by doing this, they would not violate the Oraita law. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, Hane shuka'e desura, la abri mishum bal talin. Medaya de'ai, de'al yomad shuka semichi, aval mishum bal tashe vadai over. Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, teaches that the merchants in Surah, they buy and sell things in the marketplace, but that meets on the market day. So their workers know that their boss only brings in income on market day, and therefore they're expecting, that's the agreement, that even though they work from days before, that they're going to be paid only on market day. So they do not violate the prohibition of Baal Talin, that you have to pay them that day, or if they work during the day, pay them at night. If they work at night, pay them during the day. They do not violate that because they know that their bosses are relying on the income that they're going to get on market day. However, even though they don't violate the main prohibition of Baal Talin, we saw yesterday that there's a secondary prohibition of do not delay that we learned from Pasuk and Mishle, that applies even past the first day. Baal Talin only applies that first day that you have to pay them, but then if the longer you go, you violate Baal Tasheh, so that would be violated, assuming the owner has some money and can pay them even before the market day. He should pay them properly immediately. However, if he doesn't have money and he has to wait till market day, the workers understand and he will not violate Baal Talin. Sechir Sha'ot, Goveh Kol Halayla Vechol Hayom. The Mishnah taught that, first the Mishnah taught about a day laborer who works all day, you can pay them all night. If they work all night, you pay them all day. But if someone works only for a couple of hours during the day or a couple of hours during the night, so Sechir Sha'ot, so the Mishnah says they can collect all night and all day. It's not really clear what this is talking about. Did they work a little bit during the day or a little bit at night? So we have two interpretations. Amar Rav, Sechir Sha'ot de Yom Goveh Kol Hayom. Sechir Sha'ot de Laila Goveh Kol Halayla. Rav's opinion is, if he worked a couple of hours during the day, so then you have to pay him sometime during the rest of that day. And if he worked a couple of hours at night, then you have to pay him at sometime during the rest of that very night. Ushmuel amar sechir sha'ot yom goveh kol hayom. Sechir sha'ot layla goveh kol halayla vechol hayom. Shmuel agrees regarding the daytime. If he worked a couple of hours during the day, then you have to pay him during that day. But if he worked for a couple of hours during the night, then you can pay him any time that night, or you have also until the next day, maybe because in the Hebrew calendar that the day starts at night and continues during the day, so it's considered the same calendar day, and so you have longer. So now let's read both of them into the Mishnah. Tanan sechir sha'ot goveh kol halayla vechol hayom tiyubta derav. The Mishnah said someone who works for a couple of hours they have a right to collect their wages all night and all day. We understand, according to Shemuel, this is talking about someone that works a little bit at night for a couple of hours, so he's the one that can collect all night and all day. So good, Shemuel can understand it that way. However, how's Rav going to understand it? According to Rav, where is there a situation of a person that can collect all night and all day? It's either only all night or only all day. Amar lach Rav, listadin katan sechir sha'ot yom goveh kol hayom sechir sha'ot layla goveh kol halayla. So Rav says you have to split the Mishnah and explain that it's talking about two different cases. If you work for some hours during the day, then that's v'chol hayom is going on that case. You can collect any time during the day. And if he works for some hours during the night, then he can collect all night. So kol halayla v'chol hayom is talking about two different cases. Tenan, haya sechir Shabbat sechir chodesh sechir shana sechir shavua yoseh bayom goveh kol hayom yoseh balayla goveh kol halayla v'chol hayom. The continuation of the Mishnah said, if someone is a weekly laborer, or he works for a month or for a year or for an entire set of 7 years, so if he leaves that job during the daytime, then you have to pay him during that daytime. If he ends that job at night and leaves, then you have to pay him either all that night or the next day. So this we understand fine. According to Shemuel, you see, someone who works for a couple of hours only is the same as someone who maybe worked for 7 years and he happened to get off in the middle of the day. And so either way, he has to get paid that day. And if he gets off during the middle of the night, that's the same as working for a couple of hours during the night and ending. The point is, when do you end? If you end at the end of the night, that was the first case of the Mishnah. End of the night, then you get paid during the day and so on. But if you end sometime in the middle of the night, then according to this Mishnah, you can get paid all night and all day. That fits Shemuel perfectly. What is Rav going to do with this Mishnah? Amar lach Rav, Tana'ehi detanya, Sechir shaot hayom gobel kol hayom, Sechir shaot halayla gobel kol halayla, Debrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rav said, actually, this is a machloket Tanaim, and our Mishnah here follows one opinion, but I don't have to follow that opinion because I have here Rabbi Yehuda, that's the fourth generation Tana, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the fifth generation composer of the Mishnah. So the Baraita here says that someone who works some hours during the day can collect all night, and if he worked at night some hours, then he collects, if he worked during the day, he collects the rest of the day. If he works a little at night, then he collects the rest of the night. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And the Rav says, I follow Rabbi Yehuda, so I don't have to answer to the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon omer, sechir shaot deyom gobe kol hayom, sechir shaot delayla gobe kol halayla vechol hayom. And Rabbi Shimon, that would be the author of this Mishnah, and also the opinion of Shemuel, that someone works all during the day, you have to pay him during the day, but if they work for a couple of hours at night, then you can pay them either that night or the next day. Mikan amru, now we're continuing the Braita. Kol hakobesh sechir over b'chamisha shemot halalu va'aseh. Mishum bal tashok et re'acha, mishum bal tigzol, mishum bal tashok sachir ani, mishum bal talin, mishum biyomoti ten secharo, mishum lo tavo alav hashemesh. We learn from here that anyone who withholds the wages of a hired laborer will violate 5, literally names, but 5 different pisukim, 5 different prohibitions, and also 1 positive commandment. Let's count them. Mishum bal ta'ashok et re'acha, do not oppress your neighbor, that's in Vayikra. Bal tigzol, that's in the same pasuk in Vayikra. Do not oppress the wages of a poor person, so you can't withhold wages from anybody, re'acha. And then Devarim comes and says specifically a poor person, to add another prohibition if the person is poor. And also bal talin, do not keep the wages overnight. That's a pasuk in Vayikra that talks about someone who worked during the day. You have to make sure to pay them the following night. And also, Yom Beyomoti Ten Secharo, that is in Devarim, which is talking about someone that worked during the night. You have to pay them during the day. And Lo Tavo Alav Hashemesh, which is also in Devarim. Devarim Pesukim are back-to-back, 24:14 and 24:15. And there it says, and do not wait till the sun sets upon him. That also is talking about someone that worked at night, and you have to pay them sometime during the next day before sunset. The second to last one, B'yamoti ten secharo, is the misvat aseh, pay him, and all the other ones are the 5 lo ta'aseh prohibitions. So now we ask, you said that you're going to violate all these 5 negative commandments, but that's not true, because some of them apply during the day and some at night. Bal talin, that's talking about someone that works during the day, and you have to pay them sometime during the night. Whereas the one in Devarim is talking about someone that works at night, and you have to pay them sometime during the day. So you can't violate both of these prohibitions. Either he worked during the day, and then you violate the night prohibition, or he worked during the night and you violate the day prohibition. So why are you saying that he violates all these 5? Shem sechirut be'alma. No, what I mean is that the name of the paying of wages, the concept, the general category, has 5 prohibitions. In any individual case, you wouldn't violate all 5 of them, because it depends if it's night, if it's day, is he poor, what are the circumstances. But there are 5 general prohibitions and 1 positive commandment regarding this topic. Ezehu oshek ve'ezehu gezel. Now we're going to define precisely what do these words mean. Both of these prohibitions are mentioned in the pasuk in Vayikra 19 that says "Lo ta'ashok et re'acha ve'lo tigzol." So don't defraud or oppress your friend, and don't steal from him. And also, don't keep the wages of a laborer until the morning, talking about someone that you have to pay at night. So what are each of these referring to? It's not just about stealing, because we have other pisukim for just plain old stealing, taking someone's wallet. And so therefore, let's see three opinions about what these words mean. So first, Amar Rav Chisda, lech vashub zehu oshek. Yesh lecha biyadi, ve'ani noten lecha, zehu gezel. If someone owes someone else money and he says, come back tomorrow, and then he comes out, and the next day, come back tomorrow, he keeps delaying him, says, yeah, I owe you, but I'll pay you next week, I'll pay you next month. That is called oppressing. Whereas, if he says, I do owe you, but I'm just not paying you, I'm never paying you, that is called stealing. So Rav Chisda says that's what this applies to. So of course you can't just take someone's wallet, but this applies to either delaying payment continually or just saying, I'm not paying you. Now, matkif la Rav Sheshat, ezu oshek shechiva alav Torah korban, dumya de pikadon deka kafar le mamona. Rav Sheshat disagrees with Rav Chisda because it has to be the term for oshek has to be something that the Torah would require a korban. Where is he getting this from? From Vayikra chapter 5. Here it's talking about Korban Me'ilah. This is not Me'ilah for stealing from the Bet HaMikdash or the Mishkan. That's a different type. But this paragraph is talking about Pikadon. If someone, I have a deposit of yours, and you come and claim the deposit, right? Says, give me my deposit. And I say, no, I don't have a deposit of yours, and I swear falsely about it. Afterwards, I'm found to be lying. So, of course, I have to return it plus a fifth, and I have to bring a korban. So, we see here that that's a special case where I have a deposit of yours. And the pasuk goes on and lists other cases, b'tzumet yad, dealing deceitfully, and then gazel or ashak. That's our two terms from Vayikra 19. So you see, we have to define the terms the same in chapter 19 and in chapter 5, and therefore we have to interpret them both in such a way that they are similar to the Pikadon case and would require, if I swore falsely about it, to me to bring a korban. So how are we going to figure out that case for the concept of ashak? So here's how he says it. El amar Rav Sheshat. Netativ lecha zehu oshek. Yesh lecha biyadi ve'ani noten lecha zehu gezel. If I say, I already paid you. Yes, I did owe you money. I already paid you. That's oshek. And would require a korban if you swore falsely. And the gezel is the same. That he agrees with Rav Chisda. If I say, I do owe you, but I'm not giving it to you, that's gezel. So that's the opinion of Rav Sheshat. מתקיף לאביי, איזהו גזל שחייבה עליו תורה קורבן? דומיה דפיקדון בעינן, דקה כפר לבממונה. Abaye says, no, that's not sufficient, because the word gezel also has to be redefined. When the Torah says gezel, you have to bring a korban for that. That's similar to a case of pikadon. Has to be a case where he denies that he owes money. And the way you defined it is, I owe you money, but I'm not paying you. Well, then you admitted that you owe money. But in the Pikadon case, he denied he owed money. Ela amar Abaye, lo secharticha me'olam zehu oshek. Netativ lecha zehu gezel. So Abaye redefines both of them, and he says, if he says, I never hired you in the first place, that's what it means, oppressing. I don't owe you because I never hired you. And gezel is, I did hire you, but I already paid you. So he's putting gezel, what Rav Sheshat says was oshek netativ lecha. And so now you have two cases where he denies that he owes anything altogether. Either he never owed him, or I owed you, but I paid you. Well, Rav Sheshat, ma'ishena oshek da kashya le, u'ma'ishena gezel de la kashya le. Now we ask Rav Sheshat, the middle opinion, how come he had a problem with Rav Chisda's answer only regarding oshek, but for gezel, he agreed with Rav Chisda and left it the same, of a case as that I owe you, but I'm not paying you. How come he didn't ask about that it should be similar to Pikadon? Amalach gezel digzale v'hadar kefare. So he says, gezel is talking about a case where first he stole from him and said, I'm not paying you. And then later he changed his claim and said, actually, I don't owe you. So in fact, that case of Gezel, he's adding just another layer to it and saying, yes, that was also a case where he denied that he owes anything, but he did it at a later stage. And so therefore, that case of Gezel, according to Rav Sheshet, also fits into the Pikadon case where he, not at first, but eventually denies that he owes anything. Okay, so then why not say Oshek? Also, you could say the same thing, that at first he said, come back tomorrow. And then he said, you know what, I don't owe you anything. And so you can agree with Rav Chisda's definition, but just add on a secondary layer. We say answer, Hachi hashta bishlam matam ketiv o begazel miklal deodeh le meikara. Aval gabe oshek miketiv o beoshek o ashak ketiv shashako kevar. There's different tenses in the language there. We can look back and see begazel o ashak. See, ashak is in past tense. He did it. Begazel is in a matter of stealing. Therefore, that's different. If you say in a matter of stealing, so that means, there's two steps. First, he agreed, yes, I owe you, and but I'm not going to pay you. And then he says, no, what? I don't owe you. So that's the two-step process. You can fit that into the word begazel. But the word ashak, it doesn't say be'oshek regarding oppression, but it says he already oppressed him. So that has to be a one-stage deal, and that means he already denied him, and therefore Rav Sheshet says, I have to redefine that one, which is what he does, and he says, Oshek is, I already paid you, and he says that right from the beginning. Rava Amar, Zehu Oshek, Zehu Gezel, Lamachilekana Katub Labora, Bishne Lavin. Rava has a completely different answer from these three that we just saw. He says Oshek and Gezel are referring to the same thing. There is no difference between the two. So why does the Pasuk say two different words? So that the person that steals will violate both of these prohibitions. Okay, next Mishnah. אחד שכר אדם ואחד שכר בהמה ואחד שכר כלים יש בו משום ביומו תיתן שכרו ויש בו משום לא תלין פעולת שכיר לתך עד בוקר. Both someone who does not pay a person's wages, a laborer, and also someone who rents an animal or rents utensils, should pay also on time. And if he doesn't pay on time, with the same definitions. If you rented something, I rented an animal to work all day, I have to pay you for the rental of the animal that night. And if I don't, then I violate biyomoti ten secharo and lo talin peulat sachir itechad boker. So I violate both the pasuk in Devarim and the pasuk in Vayikra. Now, when do you violate ematai? Bizman sheteva'o lo teva'o eno over alav. Himchahu esel chedvani o esel shulchani eno over alav. This seems to be referring to all cases, a case of paying wages or paying rental. When do you violate these laws of paying on time? Only if the worker came to claim payment, right? He came and said, okay, I finished work for the day, or I finished yesterday, and so I want to get paid now at night because I finished working. So if he came to claim and he didn't get paid, then the boss violates. But if he never came to collect his paycheck, then the boss does not violate. The boss doesn't have to go run around to find the worker to pay him on time. So if the worker only comes after a few days, so that's okay. He could pay him after that. Now, if the worker and the boss made a deal, the boss says, I'm not going to pay you cash directly. Instead, you can go to the grocery store or to the money changer, and you'll collect your wages from there. This would be convenient. The storekeeper and the money changer, they had lots of cash around, so they served kind of like as banks. And so he says, I have an account over there, and just go there and you could pick up food from the grocery store or money from the money changer. So if they agree to that deal, and then the worker goes to the money changer, money changer says, no, I'm not paying you today, I'm out of cash, come back in 2 days, then the boss does not violate because they made this deal that he offloaded the responsibility to pay to that money changer, and so then the boss does not violate this law. Sachir bizmano nishpa v'notel, aval zimano eno nishpa v'notel. Im yesh aidim sheteva'o bizmano, hareh ze nishpa v'notel. If, let's say a person worked all day, and that means he has to get paid that night. And so he comes to get paid, And the boss says, I paid you already, right? So now who's right? Did he get paid or did he not? If it's still during that night, which is all the time that he's supposed to that he has to get paid, the worker can make a vow, I did not get paid yet, and he can take money. That's because that's the time when he would get paid, and we should believe him if he didn't get paid yet. It doesn't make most people don't pay up, for a second. They'll be like, okay, I have all night. So it's likely that they would wait till the end of the time period, and therefore we're going to believe the worker with the vow. On the other hand, if the time already passed and the worker didn't come to collect his paycheck until a couple of days later, and he says, oh, I'm coming to claim my paycheck, and the boss says, I already paid you. In that case, it's more likely that the boss is telling the truth, because most of the time people come to collect their money right away. So this is a little strange. He came 2 days later. In that case, we do not allow the worker to make a vow and just collect. They would have to bring witnesses. Now, if the worker can bring witnesses that he asked for the money at the time, that night, the night right after he worked, he came and says, please pay me, and he didn't get paid, and the witnesses saw him that he asked for money. In that case, since we know that he asked for money, then we would believe him just like we would believe him on that night. So since we know he asked for the money on that night, and if he then makes a vow also, he can collect the money. Ger toshav yesh bo mishum biyomot iten secharo, ve'en bo mishum lo talin peulat sachir itecha ad boker. Ger toshav is non-Jew who lives in Eretz Yisrael, keeps the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. If he works for a day, you have to pay him also on time. And if you don't pay him, you violate the law biyomoti tensechado, of paying him during the day. But you do not violate the law of do not keep his wages up until the morning. Meaning, one only violates the pasuk in Devarim, which is about paying during the day for someone that worked at night, but there is no violation of the pasuk in Vayikra. The Gemara will explain why there should be a difference. Maneh Matnitin, who is the author of our Mishnah? Lo Tanakama de Me'achecha ve'lo Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. It seems like it's neither Tana of the following Beraita, not the Tanakama that is going to learn something from Achecha, and not Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Maihi, what's this Beraita? Detanya, Me'achecha pirat acherim, gerecha ze ger sedek, bisharecha ze ochel nebelot. Let's look at this pasuk in Devarim so that we can understand it in context. So it's pasukim 14 and 15. Lo ta'ashok sachir ani ve'ebyon. So this is the pasuk that refers specifically to a poor person. Poor person will come up again in the next pasuk. Me'achecha, so here it is. We're going to derive derasha from these pesukim. Me'achecha, from your brother. Migerecha, from the stranger. Sheba said that's in your land. Bisharecha, in your gates. Beyomot, iten secharo. Pay him during the day. That's the misvat aseh. V'lo tavo alav shemesh. Don't let the sun set and not pay him. Why? Ki ani hu. Because he's poor. Ve'elav hu noseh et nafsho. And his life depends on getting these wages, right? He works from, day to day and eats whatever he makes that day. He uses for food. And so if you don't pay him, he'll really be in trouble. And then he will cry out to God, and you will have guilt upon yourself, and therefore specifically about a poor person. Okay, so now that we see these pesukim inside, here's the Baraita. It says, Me'achecha, the mem is a limiting word that says this does not include others. Others meaning non-Jews. There's no law about paying a non-Jewish worker on time. And gerecha, this comes to include ger sedek. So someone that converts to Judaism and you hire him, you have to pay him on time. The word bisharecha, that comes to include ochel nebelot. Ochel nebelot is a ger toshav, that if you have a nevela, you can give it to the ger who lives bisharecha, the pasuk says regarding him. And so this is a ger toshav. So we see here that Tanakama is including a ger toshav. One has to pay them on time. אין לי אלא שיחת אדם, מניין לרבות בהמה וכלים, תלמוד לומר בארצך, כל שבארצך, וכולן אומרים בכל השמות הללו. And so I only know that's regarding paying wages for a person. How about paying rental for an animal or for vessels? Oh, the pasuk says, in your land, be'arsecha, including not only bisharecha, but also in your land, anything in your land, anything that's in your land that you rent, that you have to pay for on time. And regarding all of these cases, one violates all of the Pesukim. So we see that according to Tanakama, although the Pasuk regarding Ger Toshav is said regarding Devarim, but then it applies to, we apply the prohibition of Vayikra also. Okay, so Tanakama is easy to remember. For all cases, whether it's vessels or Ger Toshav, one violates all of the Pesukim. מכאן אמרו, אחד שכר אדם ואחד שכר בהמה ואחד שכר כלים. יש משום בהמות ייתן שכרו, ויש בהן משום בעל טלין פעולת שכיר. And therefore, it's continuing Tanakama, the sages said, this Baraita is quoting like an earlier oral tradition, that it's saying this is the sources, and now this validates this earlier oral tradition that says whether it's paying for rental, for wages of a person, or for an animal, or for vessels, one violates all of the laws. The law in Devarim that says you have to pay on time if you're paying during the day, and do not keep the wages at night, the pasuk in Vayikra. That's all Tanakama. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Get Toshav, Yesh bo mishum beyomo titen secharo, ואין בו משום לא תלין, בהמה וכלים אין בהם אלא משום בעל תעשוק בלבד. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda says that if one does not pay a ger toshav on time, then that will violate biyomo titen secharo, that's the pasuk in Devarim, but they will not violate the pasuk of Baal Talin, the pasuk in Vayikra. So in that regard, Rabbi Yosef is the same as the Tana of our Mishnah. However, here's the problem. For payment of rental for animals and vessels, he says, no, there only Baal Tashok, only one prohibition is violated, not both. That's not the same as our Tanav, our Mishnah, who says for vessels and animals, one violates both of them. So here we explain the question, Maneh, who is the author of our Mishnah? If you say it's Tanakama, that's the problem, because Tanakama said, Ger Toshav, we learn from Me'achecha, but they also, as we'll see in a second, apply the other pasuk to Ger Toshav, and so therefore Tanakama of this Baraita says Ger Toshav violates both, and our Mishnah says only one. And if you say it's Rabbi Yosef, well, it's true, he's okay regarding the Ger Toshav, but he says that for vessels and animals, one violates only one pasuk, whereas the author of our Tana says he violates both pesukim. So what are we going to do? Amar Rava, Hai Tana deber b'Yishmael hu. The Tana deber b'Yishmael. Chad sechar adam vechad sechar behema vechad sechar kelim. Yesh bo mishum biyomot titen secharo mishum lo talin. Ger toshav yesh bo mishum biyomot titen secharo ve'en bo mishum bar talin. Rava says, I have another candidate altogether. It's neither of the Tanaim in that Baraita, but I have a Baraita from the school of Rabbi Ishmael that says whether someone owes money as wages to a person, or for rental for an animal, or for vessels, there is a violation of both Pesukim, Biyomot Secharo, and Lo Talin. Good, that's the same as our Mishnah. And regarding Ger Toshav, that has a violation of Biyomot Secharo, but there's no violation of Baal Talin, which is also the same as our Mishnah. My tamad de Tanakama de me'achecha, gamar sachir sachir. Okay, so now going back to the Braita, Tanakama said, we learn from the words achecha that means only your brother, and that excludes a non-Jew. But then we say migerecha, that includes a ger toshav. Fine, that applies the pasuk in Devarim. But what about the pasuk in Vayikra? How are you going to know that for ger toshav you violate Vayikra also? Oh, he has a gezerah shava. Gamar sachir says the word sachir in both pasukim, and that's how you learn that the prohibition in one applies to the other pasuk as well. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, lo gamar sachir. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, he says no, only the pasuk in Devarim applies to a ger toshav, and he does not learn this gezerah shava, and so he does not have to apply the pasuk in Vayikra to the ger toshav. Nihi delo gamar sachir bema v'chelim bishum biyomo titen secharo namem nichayev. Now we ask further against Rabbi Yosef. Even though he does not use this gezerah shava of sachir, nevertheless, regarding payment for animals and renting vessels, he should he should have the prohibition of biyomot titen secharo, because that's where we learned the prohibition from be'arsecha, anything in your land. That's the pasuk in Devarim. So Rabbi Yosef says, oh, I only have lo ta'ashok. That applies to vessels and animals. That's in Vayikra. But why, even if without sachir, the word arsecha appears in Devarim, and that should teach you that you have to pay for rental also. So how come Rabbi Yosef does not say that? Hataneh Rabbi Chanina Amar Kera v'lo tabo alav Hashem meshki anihu mi she'en ba'in lidei aniyut va'ashirut yasu behemot v'chelim she'enan ba'in lidei aniyut va'ashirut. So Rabbi Chananya has a baraita that explains it, because the pasuk says, do not let the sun set without paying him because he is poor. So you see, this pasuk in Devarim only applies to someone who could possibly be poor or rich, but animals and vessels, they don't have bank accounts, they can't be rich, they can't be poor, and therefore the whole context of Devarim only applies to paying wages to people, but not to for animals or vessels. Tanakama, haiki anihu, my abid le. So Tanakama, what does he do with those same words, ki anihu? Homi balak dim ani le'ashir. That's to teach me that if the boss has limited funds and he can only pay one person, he should pay the poor person first, and then the rich person he pays after, because the poor person is dependent on that money. The rich person can get by for a little while. Rabbi Yosef says, I agree with that law, but I have another pasuk also in Devarim 24 that says, do not oppress a higher laborer who is poor or needy. Ani and Evyon. Evyon is understood to be even poor, totally destitute. Ani is poor, but he has some things. So I learned it from that other pasuk that you have to pay a poor person before a rich person. Tanakama. Okay, Tanakama, what are you going to do with that second pasuk in Devarim that has Evyon? Chad lakdim ani la'ashir v'chad lakdim ani le'evyon. It says, I need both. One of them is to tell me that a poor ani gets paid before a rich person, and the other one is that an ani gets paid before the evyon, who's totally destitute. The guy in the middle, that's like on the poverty line, he gets paid first before the rich and the guy who's even poorer. Why? We understand why before the rich person, because he's poorer. So you'd think, all the more so, the guy who's totally destitute. But as they're about to say, the guy who's totally destitute, Ebyon, he has no shame to go and keep badgering and asking for money for his wages, so he'll get his wages. And Ani is a respectable person, and he's not gonna want to ask, and he might not get paid at all. So the Ani gets it first, and that's what we say now. Usiricha. We need both of these pesukim. You couldn't learn one from the other. If you only told me the pasuk regarding the Evyon, that you pay the Ani before the Evyon, is because the Evyon is not embarrassed to keep asking, so the Evyon you can be paid second. But compared to a rich person who is embarrassed, and rich person is embarrassed to go and get and ask for money, we might think that you should pay the rich person before the ani, and therefore I need the pasuk regarding the ani alone to say ani gets paid first before the rich person. And if I only had regarding the pasuk regarding ashir and ani, then I would say you pay the ani first because he needs it. But if it was Evyon really needs it, so maybe I would think that you pay the Evyon before the ani, and that's why I need the other pasuk that tells me ani and Evyon, you pay the ani and not the Evyon. Ve'tana didan. מה נפשך? אי יליף שכיר אפילו גר תושב נמה. אי לא יליף שכיר בהמה וכלים מנהלה. Now back to the Tana of our Mishnah, who said, for vessels you violate both, but for ger toshav you only violate the pasuk in Devarim. What are they going to do with this derasha, this gezerah shava? If they accept the gezerah shava that the Tanakama had, that we learn sachir and sachir, then they should apply the ger toshav from Devarim to Vayikra also and say you violate both. And if they do not use the gezerah shava of sachir, then how will they know that for vessels, that is said regarding arsecha and devarim? How do you know that for vessels you also apply vayikra? Leolam la yalif sachir v'shaneh hatam damar kera ve'lo talin peulat sachir ittecha ad boker shkol shepeulato ittecha. In fact, they don't use the gezerah of sachir, and so we know vessels and animals in devarim because arsecha, and we also know it in vayikra because the pasuk says, do not leave the wages of the laborer with you until morning. And so we derive from that anyone whose work is with you. And that includes animals and vessels. If he has his stuff with you, whether he labored physically with you or he has his stuff with you, you have to pay for him. You have to pay for it on time. If so, then ger toshav should also apply to both, because ger toshav, their work is with you, so you should pay him. Amar kera re'acha velo ger toshav. No, the pasuk there says re'acha, your friend, your neighbor, and that excludes ger toshav. So we have an inclusive phrase, peulat, and that includes animals and vessels, and an exclusive phrase, re'acha, only someone who is Jewish and not a ger toshav. In that case, if you have re'acha, it means only your friend. So that means your friend, another human being, but not an animal. And kelim, those are not re'acha. Hakativ itecha, it says with you, right? But those things are with you. So now we ask, listen, this is a toss-up. I know you have an inclusive phrase, an exclusive phrase, but you could have also said the other way around. How do you know that you should include only animals and vessels in peulat sachir itecha, because they are with you, and that you're going to exclude ger toshav? Why not include ger toshav in this, that they are working and they are with you? Ger toshav eno bichlal mamon re'acha. Now it makes more sense to include animals and vessels because they are included in your neighbor's money. So re'acha, and anything that belongs to re'acha, that's included. But a ger toshav does not belong to a fellow Jew, and therefore the word re'acha will exclude them. The Tanakama of the Baraita, who learned from the pasuk in Devarim, it says achecha, and then it says gerecha, and gerecha we learned that you include ger toshav. So this pasuk re'acha that we just learned, we saw over here, that means that excludes ger toshav. So what is he going to do with that? Since the Tanakama made a gezerah shava and said just like gerecha and Devarim includes ger toshav, so gezerah shava vayikra also includes ger toshav. So how is he going to explain the word re'acha? Oh, from that I learned re'acha, your neighbor, but that does not include a non-Jew. A non-Jew you don't have to pay on time. Nochri me'achecha nafka. Wait, we already know that from the pasuk in Devarim that says only your brother you have to pay on time, but a non-Jew you don't have to pay on time. So now what do we need this also? And the answer is chad l'mishra oshko v'chad l'mishra gezelo usrichi. We need one to permit not paying a nochri on time, and we need the other to permit actually stealing outright. This is a big machloket and a big subject. We're not going to get into this now. But anyway, why do we need both? If I only knew that stealing, that meaning taking something from a nochri that he already has, I would say maybe that's allowed because that this nochri did not work for you. But if he worked for you, he actually did labor for you, then you might think you have to pay him on time. And this is to teach me, no, you don't have to pay him, maybe not even on time. You don't have to pay him at all. And if you only told me the law of don't oppress him, so then I would say, well, in that case, the money never got to the nochri, so that's why I don't have to give it to him. I don't. He doesn't. He didn't ever had it, so I just don't have to give him anything. But to take something that he already has by stealing, I might think that that's not permitted, and therefore I need both of these pesukim to say that both of these things are permitted regarding a nochri. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.